Disney Princess Film History, Cinderella. In this video, we'll be exploring one of the most iconic of the Disney princesses. Premiering in 1950, it is deemed to have Walt Disney's favourite animation sequence, the transformation of Cinderella's torn dress to that of the silver ball gown. Much like Cinderella herself, the Walt Disney Studios had its own rags to riches story, which eventually propelled them back to greatness and prominence after years of misfortune. Most of us are familiar with some version of a fairy tale or legend telling the story of a poor, mistreated stepdaughter who finds love and happiness with a handsome prince. There are different versions from cultures all around the world. A Norse version includes a princess who runs away from a wicked stepmother on the back of a bull. A Portuguese Cinderella is named the Hearth Cat, who attends the races rather than a ball. It is the Grimm brothers who have the more violent version, where the stepsisters get their eyes pecked out by birds. There are believed to be over 345 confirmed versions of Cinderella, all with elements of a rags to riches story, but there could honestly be thousands. Many of the specific details we recognise in the Western version of the Cinderella tale come from the story as told by French author Charles Perrault. This is the version that Disney adapted into a feature-length film. Charles Perrault was a member of the Académie Française and a leading intellectual of his time. His dialogue, parallels between the ancients and the moderns, compared the authors of antiquity unfavourably to modern writers, and served as a forerunner for the Age of Enlightenment in Europe, ironically an era that was not always receptive to tales of magic and fantasy. Perrault's slender book, Tales of Mother Goose, was published in 1697, containing 8 simple stories including Cinderella, but was known in French as Cendrillon. Perrault's narratives belong to a storytelling tradition that has been shared by generations. If you are familiar with Disney's Cinderella, you will remember her shoes are made of glass, yet the earliest versions have her wearing a golden slipper, sometimes fur. Charles Perrault had spent years going over ancient versions of this tale, which all talked about their shoes. Their is an old French word meaning animal or squirrel. Perrault read this old word he didn't recognise and mistook it for ver, a French word for glass. Hence, in this Disney version of the story, and in nearly every version of the story in existence now, Cinderella has glass slippers, due to this mistranslation. Perrault also added the now famous elements of the fairy godmother and the pumpkin carriage. One of the most popular moral interpretations of the original fairy tale was that beauty in a woman is a rare treasure. Graciousness, however, is priceless and of even greater value. It is a true gift of the fairies. Without it, nothing is possible. With it, one can do anything. Another moral is to have a great advantage with intelligence, courage, good breeding, and common sense. These and similar talents are good to have, though you may not have to call upon a fairy godmother to receive these gifts. Cinderella is seen as both an end and beginning for different eras of the Disney animation studio. The 1930s and early 40s produced groundbreaking and experimental films, though several of them were commercial flops. Walt Disney had not had a huge hit since Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and in 1948, Walt Disney Productions was over $4 million in debt and was on the verge of bankruptcy. And then, the world was thrown into chaos with the Second World War, cutting off much of the overseas cinema market. The future of the animation department depended greatly on the success of Cinderella. Disney insiders claimed that if this movie had failed at the box office, it would have been the end of the Walt Disney Studios. But Walt had known his own rags to riches story. Coming from a poor working background, he had believed in the American dream. That's why he knew Cinderella, a story of an underdog, someone who faced the impossible, would be a smash of a story. Walt was a man who loved the idea of transformation. Cinderella was also the first film to be worked on by all of the legendary 9 old men of the Walt Disney Animation Department. It is said that this group of animators were responsible for saving the studio. Mark Davis, Eric Larson, and Les Clark animated the character Cinderella together. Mark apparently wanted to give Cinderella a more sophisticated quality, whereas Eric wanted a simpler character approach. In the end, she had a down-to-earth warmth, as well as intelligence, wits and sharpness to make her more interesting and three-dimensional. The studio was on a tight budget, and live-action reference was used extensively for the human characters to keep the animation costs down. At least 90% of the movie was done in live-action model before animation. They used this as a guide to do layouts and action sequences. Some of the animators were against the use of live action footage, saying they could do without, though it did enhance their drawings. It may sound like a less creative way of doing things, but these animators were lovers of their craft. They had a critical eye and knew they had to go further than live action or it would look stilted. It took around 2 years with the experimental work in story and shooting of live action. Once they started animating, they did the whole thing in 6 months. They knew it would be a good picture as they had Walt's vision and the audience loved it. Walt Disney, all the animators and everyone who worked on the film showed up to the premiere. It was a bigger success than Snow White. In a personal letter to Walt Disney, Casablanca director Michael Curtiz hailed the film as the masterpiece of all pictures you have done. Each Disney princess is certainly a product of the period in which the movie was made, but they are almost always set in a fantasy historical setting, and thus their costumes are fantasy historical as well. Cinderella's outfits are most likely inspired by the late Victorian era. The dress that the stepsisters tear apart is thought to be inspired by the designs of Salvador Dali, and the magical gown is the then contemporary style of Christian Dior. Dior's immediate success was sealed by a promotional tour across the US in the autumn of 1947 when Disney started working on Cinderella. His new look was essentially a revival of the 19th century hourglass figure, softly rounded shoulders, tight sleeves, a nipped-in waistline, and a very, very wide skirt. The transformation sequence pairs Cinderella's passage from servant to princess with the shift from homemade tailoring in wartime to the courtier's ready-to-wear creations. In the movie, Cinderella's ball gown is an incredibly pale and shimmery light blue. It almost looks completely white, but in promotional material and the 2015 live-action version, it's presented as blue. This dress is a mismatch of possible eras. The silhouette is very full, but mostly over the hips. This is very much like the mid-18th century shape created by hoops that are flat in back and front and only extend over the sides. Long over-the-elbow gloves were popular at various points in the 19th and 20th centuries. Chokers have been worn in many eras, most notably the mid-18th century and from the 1860s through the 1910s. Cinderella's hair is a mix of eras too. For the ball, she wears the same bangs, with the rest of the hair up in a French twist and a headband. This high on the crown of the head knot looks similar to the styles worn in the late 1880s and early 1890s. Through faith, hard work, and a bit of luck, everyone associated with the film's production were determined to create a great film that would stand the test of time for all time. As a result, it was a spectacular hit, becoming the greatest critical and commercial hit for the studio since Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and helped reverse the studio's fortunes. Cinderella received many international film honours, including 3 Academy Award nominations. Much like Cinderella herself, the Walt Disney Studios had its own rags-to-riches story, which eventually propelled them back to greatness and prominence after years of misfortune. Cinderella was the first Disney film to have its songs published and copyrighted by the newly created Walt Disney Music Company. When Disney was preparing the music for Cinderella, he wanted the songs to be a commercial success. The songwriters of the film were members of the Tin Pan Alley, a collective name for New York City-based music publishers and songwriters. The soundtrack album was a major hit, selling 750,000 copies, and the music was nominated for Academy Awards. The album was #1 in the USA for a year. The prince is never called Prince Charming in the film, and he isn't given any personal name. In earlier drafts of the screenplay, the prince originally played a larger role and had more character development than what he ultimately received in the final version. Eileen Woods, the voice of Cinderella, did not originally audition for the role. She was actually approached by her friends, the film composers, Mac David and Jerry Livingston, to record a demo of the songs. When Walt Disney heard the demo, he said, "I want her to be the voice of Cinderella." The young woman, who worked in radio with just 1 film credit to her name, was to be the lead role in a Disney film, and she didn't even know what she was thinking for at the time. Eileen suffered from Alzheimer's disease in the later years of her life. During this time, she did not even remember that she had played Cinderella, but nurses claimed that she was very much comforted by the song "A Dream is a Wish Your Heart Makes." Cinderella can be found in all the Disney parks. She can be found greeting guests in the Fairy Tale Hall at Walt Disney World, the centerpiece of which is Cinderella's castle. Behind the castle is a fountain with a statue of Cinderella. Guests can get a princess makeover at the Bibbidi Bobbidi Boutique and have a character breakfast at Cinderella's royal table. In conclusion, Cinderella is one of the most popular Disney films of all time. It saved the studio from bankruptcy and joined together the talents of the 9 old men. The character of Cinderella may be profiled as a passive, one-dimensional, bland character, but on the other hand, positive views of the character praise her hard-working and strong-willed nature, her courage in the face of evil, her design and style, and her role as a fashion icon. In the following video of the series, I'll be delving into Disney's next princess film, Sleeping Beauty and Princess Aurora. Is Cinderella your favourite Disney princess? Was there anything new that you learned about her film? If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, comment your thoughts, and check out what other Disney projects I have on my channel. Thank you for watching.